So we're here in Gillespie County in a little creek bed, and we're looking at the diagonal construction of the ancients. So we have the flow of the creek, or the meeting of the hills, hill on one side on the right, hill on the other side on the left, and we look down and we see what we always see, without fail, diagonal construction of the hills. These are hills meeting together in a little valley that then becomes what we call a creek. So we have the diagonal construction, all right? There's the flow of the creek, here's the diagonal, here's the diagonal, here's the diagonal. I've always said an approximate 45, and that's what we have, approximate 45. Then we have another diagonal meeting that diagonal. So we have an arrow pointing up the creek, or up the line of the hill right here. See that? That's where the two diagonals meet. Let's see if we can get that. See if we can get that on video. So it is diagonal, which makes sense to us in a common sense kind of way. I'm just going to slip under here. See if we can get to another area. So we have the insistent stacking of the ancients, right? So they're stacking their layers. It's not sedimentary layers, those are stacked on each other. And then we have the alternating hard and soft layers. Let's check it out. Okay. Soft layers have been taken out by water. See the soft chalky layer right there? Soft chalky, taken out. Right? Then a harder layer. Stacking, the insistent stacking of the ancients. Let's see if we can see this better. There's a tiny soft chalky layer in between those two hard layers, right? See that little soft chalky layer? Soft chalky layer. Stacking. And then we're just gonna look at this diagonal stonework. Approximate 45 here, approximate 45 here. Then we have that line. So we can obviously see that this is not natural. This is ancient construction. The base of the valleys, where it needs to be the strongest, is diagonal, right? The base of the valleys is diagonal. And here they stepped it down. All right, so this isn't, yes, it has been eroded, but this isn't an accident of nature. They are stepping this down, all right? So, see this molded one piece? This goes down. So it's coming down. So if this was flush, it would be up about here, but it's coming down because they're anticipating going down. So they're leaning their layers as well as stepping their layers. So it's obviously not erosion. You don't see water erosion on this. There's no path of the water. Okay, what's been eroded is sections have been taken out by the rushing water, but this concrete has stayed strong. So this mottled concrete that you see, there's no erosion of it. This is the bottom layer, okay? This is what is then the next bottom layer, right? And you don't see erosion from water on these layers. It's all mottled, it's all sharp-edged. There's no smoothing out by the water. So we know that the only erosion that has taken place is that pieces have been taken out. So here's a couple pieces that come out because they're stacking pieces that are not adhered to each other. See how they're not adhered? They're just really close to each other. There's a curving one. Pretty meticulous, right? So the seams are there between them, but they're not adhered. Some are, but some aren't. So like this one might be adhered to some degree, but eventually it could come out if the water erosion, if the water force is strong enough, you know? So then you get these pieces like this. So obviously this is not natural. We have many lines of evidence showing that these hills, and we can see the hills best down in the creek beds, are artificial. We saw this exact same joining construction in the crevice between the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun and the Bosnian Pyramid of Love. So this stepped crevice, which this is, a crevice between hills, but in Bosnia it's a crevice between pyramids, which join hills, by the way. This joining construction keeps those two pyramids in Bosnia together, just like the joining construction keeps these two hills together. And the way they do it is with diagonal sections, diagonal stacked sections. And these seams are very, very, very strong, right? But eventually they will come out. And these are not perfect Grecian surfaces. We don't know how old they are, but they have survived intact. We have sort of an alternating of the diagonal. So we have this diagonal here, right, on top of this other diagonal. So they're sort of alternating their diagonals there, but then the diagonals join right here. But check out how we have the primary diagonal going this way, right? Then suddenly down here, the primary diagonal's going that way. Interesting, right? So they alternate the primary diagonal, but then they join the diagonals in some layers, like right here. So there's the join. There's the little arrow. The arrow pointing us up the hill is right there. That's where those two join. So it's diagonal, right? Meeting this diagonal. Very interesting. Here's a diagonal that meets another diagonal. So as we go up the creek a bit, we see this diagonal line to the flow of the river. Diagonal construction. It's a little more clear right up here. Diagonal construction to the line between the hills. So we have an insistent diagonal building. Here's the arrow pointing up. There's the arrow saying this away. Diagonal. Not a perfect 45 there, but let's see what else we find. I haven't been up here. Interesting. So we have the diagonal here, right? So we have this alternating layer, hard and soft, which we've seen everywhere. In Bosnia, we've seen it in Texas. We've seen it everywhere. So we have the soft chalky layer, the real hard layer, right? Then there's another hard layer. So the soft one is for earthquake mitigation, cushion, and then this is for structural stability, the hard layer. So the soft chalky layer lets the hills move and stay in place if there's an earthquake, right? Now, we can also speculate that the hills were built for a specific reason beyond having creeks and rivers in between them. In other words, we can speculate that the hills were multi-purpose beyond water flow and negative ion generation from the turbulence of the water. Negative ions being very healthy for humans and for animals. So the other possibility, or one other possibility for the motivation to build hills in the past is large asteroid impact. So if you have two hills and a large asteroid comes that's spanning those two hills, the kinetic energy that is going toward the center of the Earth is instantly translated into kinetic energy that's going horizontal instead of at a 90 degree. So in other words, instead of going straight down at a 90, it's going along the horizontal plane. That's really good. So the hills explode. So here's one hill, right? And there's a hill over here. The asteroid hits them, and this hill explodes into the valley that's here, and this hill explodes into the valley that's here. And that's going to mitigate large asteroid impacts. Mountains and hills will do that. If you have a flat surface, then you don't have the mitigation. Now, an inner Earth civilization does have the motivation to mitigate large asteroid impacts. So we could talk about hollow planets around the universe, which undoubtedly exist. And there's some evidence of hollow planets with interior suns that has been put forward for over 100 years that has been ignored by the institutions. And if we have hollow planets, which are built to some degree, maybe they're 100% built, maybe they're just hollowed out natural objects, but there's no credible theory that gives us naturally accreted planets. So we'd have to say now, as far as science is concerned, that these planets that we see in the universe are artificial objects. So according to the best evidence that we have, and we can only deal in evidence if we're scientific. So we're looking at hollow planets, probably artificially constructed planets. And as you live in a house, and not on the roof of a house, you live inside the house, people built planets to live inside of, not on the surface. If you're on the surface, you're subject to global flooding, global droughts, asteroids crushing your your village. You're subject to cosmic rays that are very unhealthy. You're subject to surprise attacks from hostile invaders. You're subject to solar flashes. So there's an endless list of reasons to be inside a planet and not outside it. Then the question is, how do you generate heat and light? And that's been solved. You know, you can generate light with sound. You can generate heat with sound. And you can have yourself an artificial sun inside a planet. And that's what ancient races did who wanted to live on or in a planet. They lived in the planet. Other races have transcended that sort of physicality, and that's what they did. So here in the 3D world, we're oddly living on the surface of a hollow planet. I mean, we're not supposed to be on the surface, but it's okay, you know, here we are. And we are looking at the building of the ancients. And this building undoubtedly has been around for millions and millions of years. When I say millions of years, I don't mean a few million years, because there was no Big Bang. We know that, right? By the evidence. There's no evidence to support the Big Bang theory. And we have the fraud involved in trying to push this bizarre theory onto the world populace. We have the fraud involved in that. We've exposed the fraud. We've exposed the specific people who have been in positions of power, who have denied the publishing of papers that show that the Big Bang is nonsense. We have the names of the specific people who fired professors who put forward evidence that the Big Bang is nonsense. All of these things are in the video series that's called Cosmology Quest. It's a 2-part series. So we know that the Big Bang is nonsense, which means that we meaning beings in this universe, have had an infinite amount of time to advance, right? Beings in this universe have had an infinite amount of time to advance because there was no beginning to the universe as far as science is concerned. Our best evidence tells us that there was no beginning a mere, say, several billion years ago. But we have much, much more time to advance. That means the technology of building anything is extremely advanced on the part of the races who have been around much longer than our little race here on Terra, which we call Earth. So, we could call the technology that builds hills, that makes consistent diagonal seams, diagonal construction of hills, diagonal to the line between the hills, an immortal technology. Again, science does not give us a beginning to the universe, and that means that this construction technique of building hills is an immortal technology brought forward through time by the ancients. Yes, time does exist. I mean, it's very cool and new agey to say time doesn't exist, but it does exist because we have events that happen as the effect of other events. We have growth, which takes time. Organisms grow through time. They don't just grow instantaneously. So we have a helical structure to life and to solar systems and galaxies, and so time is moving like a vortex helically along, and we are in that helical vortex, and we feel the seasons as we come around and around and around in that helix. But we are not in the same place we were before. Each spring we are further down the road in the helix. We're not in a circle, we are in a spiral, and that is what time is. The universe is probably a torus, and the energy, so if you imagine a donut, and the energy of the universe is moving into the center of the donut and back out into the center and back out into the center and back out, around, spiraling around, many different possible motions for matter and energy. And that means that the universe is ever changing, but it's not a universe that then collapses into itself and then eventually has another Big Bang. It's not a Big Bang and then collapsing universe. It's a universe that's always been here, and it's moving. Its energy is moving through the torus, giving us new stars. Stars are dying. Change is the constant. And we have threads moving through this, we have constant threads, let's say, moving through this changing toroidal universe. And one of those threads is the immortal technology of the ancients, which gives us planets, part of which is hills that mitigate large asteroids. They mitigate the kinetic energy of large asteroids, that allow us wonderful water flow, negative ions, generated by that water flow, and just make up your own list about the amazing things that the ancients have given us here on Terra and throughout the universe with their planets to whatever degree they are artificially built. And let us think about the next video in this particular sub-series of the Terraforming of Terra series. The next video will be the benevolence of the ancients. This is Jock Doubleday reporting from Gillespie County, Texas. Hope you have a beautiful and especially scientific day here on Terra, which we call Earth.